Hello, everyone, and welcome to Co-Creation Station, the podcast where we talk about the law of attraction, the art of allowing spiritual magic, the mind-body-spirit connection, and how best to enjoy this mystical, miraculous, mysterious, crazy, sometimes confounding, but always incredible journey we call life. This is season 3. I can't remember what episode it is, but it is. We're recording this on Sunday, January 23rd, 2022, and it's scheduled to go live on a Monday in the future. My name is Collin. I'm a teacher, tarot oracle card reader, and I'm also a singer and guitarist in the band Red Treasure, and I am located in beautiful, sunny North Hollywood, California.
My name is Stephanie Orlina. I am a transformational life coach, and I help people shift away from negative thinking, and it transforms their lives. And I am in San Diego, California.
We want to thank you so much for listening to our podcast. If you're listening to the audio version on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, CastBox, or Overcast. And thank you so much for watching us. If you're watching us on our YouTube channel, we post a brand new episode every Monday morning. And we want to thank you so much for liking this episode, for following, subscribing to and reviewing us on your podcast platform, and subscribing to our YouTube channel here. These all help other people find us, and we are very, very grateful to you for that. We also invite you to leave us a comment on the YouTube video here, or you can always email us at cocreationstation1111@gmail.com. Each week here on Co-Creation Station, we start our discussion from a different jumping off point. And this week, we're going to talk about, I guess we kind of had two different things we're going to talk about that are definitely connected. One is like, why are so many people comfortable with you talking on and on and on about negative things, whereas if you bring up a positive thing twice, yeah. Whereas if you bring up a positive thing twice, people are like, yeah, you already told me about that. And the other thing that goes along with that is this thing. I think we maybe were talking about this in the previous episode a little bit, but we didn't get really far into it, which is, allowing ourselves as adults in the modern world to show emotion when we're in the presence of other people. Like there's so much in our culture that is just all about like not showing emotion and sort of tamping down things if you feel them. So we're going to talk about that as well. So Stephanie, you're the one that in our friend time here before, you started talking about, which I thought was a really interesting thing, about how this phenomenon of like, why are we okay with people talking about their problems all day long? But, if we already told you about something that was really great, you start hearing it a second time, you're like, yeah, you already told me that.
Well, I forget specifically what incident, but I was just thinking like, yeah, if I start to tell a friend something good, but that I've already told them before, and I start to tell them again, like say it's a story, I have some great allowing stories. And in my head, I'm thinking that they're thinking, and I don't know if this is true or not, but that they're thinking like, oh, you already told me that. Why are you telling me that again? But on the same token, it's like I could be with that same friend and bring up a problem I'm having, and they'll let me just go on. And not to say that they're stopping me. Well, so this is about me then, right? Because they're not telling me that, well, Steph, you already, well, actually, somebody has said that before. Well, you've already told me that story. But yet I can go on and on about a problem. Like, I think all of us can relate to, we have at least one or two things that are just like bugging us, or we always talk about. And I could just go on, and they would just listen. And why do we do that? Is it, like I was thinking, it's a habit, right? Like we're just used to talking about the problems, and not about the good stuff.
Yeah.
So
I think, I think that's, I think we've talked before. I think we talked a lot in season 1, actually, about what we've learned about the brain, over the last 10, 15 years in terms of the science, which is that, the brain was really designed through evolution to actually like protect us. Number one, the number one function of the brain is to help keep us alive. So in caveman, cavewoman times, what that means is its highest, most important function was looking for dangers and threats and problems.
To keep
If
us
there
alive.
was an intruder that, what's that?
To keep us alive.
Yeah, to keep us alive, right? So if there were wild animals coming to attack our family or our cave, or if there was a warring tribe coming over the hill to attack our community, or if we were running out of food, or if it was too cold and we needed to build a bigger fire or something like that, like that's what our brains were primarily. We were at such a survival oriented level that's what our brains really developed to handle the best. And sorry, you look like you want to say something.
No, I'm just listening.
Oh, okay. We are experiencing some internet issues here this morning, and I apologize. We've done everything we can to try to resolve the Zoom issues here, but yeah, Stephanie, you're frozen
Am I?
at
Right.
this point.
Okay.
Yeah, you might
Yeah.
want to log off and log
Okay.
back on.
All right. You
Sorry.
go ahead and continue your story. I'll be
All
coming
right.
back in.
Okay. Yeah, my apologies to everybody. We had in friend time we were having the internet issues, and we thought we troubleshooted them, and everything was looking fine. So sorry about that. But yeah, we were talking in season 1 about how so now today when we go through our lives on a day-to-day basis, like our brains are still kind of most commonly wired to deal with problems, threats, and dangers. And so it's trying, our brains sometimes are actually trying to find, scan our environment, scan our day, and see like what are the problems I need to solve, what are the dangers to me, what are the threats that might, harm me or, impact my life negatively in some particular way. Hello, you're back. You are not frozen now, so that's good. Yeah, and I think that today, for those of you on the audio version, Stephanie just froze in real life to look like she was freezing on Zoom, but she was trying to trick me, so it's funny. Yeah, but so I mean, modern life for the most part, not that there aren't any dangers or threats to us. I mean, if you have a walk signal and you're walking across a busy street, but you have a walk signal and the cars are supposed to have a red light, but you see, you look to your left and you see a car that doesn't seem to be observing the red light and it's coming very fast, then you do need that sort of survival part of your brain to like kick in some adrenaline for you and, either back up really quick or run fast across the sidewalk or something like that. You may be out on a nature hike and, one in a million, you might encounter like a dangerous animal that isn't often encountered and you might need to, run very fast or something like that if you see a bear or whatever. But for the most part in modern life, the things that we really get stressed out about and that we see as problems and that we start obsessing over and talking in our own minds about and analyzing and then sharing by complaining with other people and trying, that sort of stuff, like projects, like I've worked in corporate America a lot, we'll have projects, that we do. And like sometimes we'll hit a roadblock on a project and, I've done this, I've seen coworkers done it. We'll really get upset and negative and like as if a warring tribe is coming over the hill. But the reality is like we just have to do something different in Microsoft Excel or something. It's like not life threatening.
So then it's more habitual. It's just because it's habitual. That's the bottom line, right?
It's just a yeah. It's how our brains are set up, and then I think it's also how we. Yeah, it's a pattern that we form as kids, and then keep going. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think that's why I liked the "Tell Me Something Good."
Yes.
That I got from Dr. Chris years ago when I was lying on the table. She was adjusting me, and she's like, "Tell me something good," and I was like, "Ooh, I like that." I'm like, "I'm gonna take that." And she's like, "You go ahead," because I took it from whoever she did. I don't remember at the time, but I remember I started using that in my coaching, and I would just start that off. We'd say hi, hi, and then I'd be like, "Tell me something good," and and then I just started using it in like everyday life. Like my grandkids, they're much older now, but there was a time where didn't know what to say to them, and so I'd be like, "Tell me something good," and I would learn some of the coolest things.
Yeah.
And then I remember being at a restaurant one day and the waiter came over and I was like, "Tell me something good." And he was like, "What?" Like he just kind of looked at me like, excuse me? And then I said, tell me something good. And he was like, well, he goes, I'm going to be on vacation, going on vacation next week, and I'm going to blah, blah, blah. He was super happy. Um,
Yeah.
and some people, they have to like really stop and think. Because I think
Yeah.
yeah, it's just that we've talked before about the, the canyon grooves in our brains and these
Yeah.
patterns, the neural pathways that they're just deep valleys. Like they're like the Grand Canyon for negativity. And it's just accepted. And it is just retraining our brain, our thought
I
patterns.
also think, yeah, this is a really big topic. But one other aspect of it too is I think that we have. I was thinking about this week, and I think this is connected, which is like the fear of success,
Ooh.
or or our resistance to sharing our successes with others. Like there's this whole thing that I think we grow up with a lot, or not everyone, but a lot of us grow up with it in our culture, that like if you talk a lot about your successes with other people, then you're going to really run the risk of looking arrogant or egotistical, or like looking like you're trying to imply that you're better, you're somehow a higher level person than the people around you. And I know I definitely got this message in my upbringing. It's like, tamp yourself down so you don't make anyone else uncomfortable, with things going really well for you. Like if you have a success, that's good, but other people are having it really hard. So don't throw it in their face that you're doing well when they're not doing well. And I think that there's some, whenever we get into these complicated things that seem to mess us up, especially in terms of like being able to use the art of allowing really well, which is what we primarily talk about here. There is healthy and unhealthy mixed in. Like if someone's loved one has just passed away, I don't want to be like, oh, that's so bad, but I just got a bonus at my job last week. Isn't that great? Like, there's such a thing as empathy and human,
Yeah,
understanding of like when it's appropriate to share
right.
certain
Yeah.
things. So you don't
Common
want to do
sense.
that.
Common
And
sense.
there is also such a thing as egotism and arrogance, which is different than confidence and being positive. Like arrogance and being egotistical is like not, it's like really believing that you're better somehow than other people, and that your life is more important than theirs, and your successes are better than theirs, and your problems are more important than their problems, and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not talking about that either, like going around bragging, from a very egotistical, it's all about me kind of place, is not what I'm talking about. But I think we're so terrified of being that a lot of us just decide, well, we're just going to keep, most of our successes or the good things to ourselves. And then that becomes a habit where it becomes very weird if you start, because like in your coaching sessions, when I was a client, when you start I got used to it, but even, a year or two into my coaching with you, you know, I would know it's coming, but we'd start our, session on the phone, and you'd be like, tell me something good. And I'm like, man, I've been knowing this is coming for a week, and I still feel uncomfortable. Cause
Well,
like,
it just depended, all right, on how your day was going or how you were
a
feeling
week.
that
Yeah.
morning or whatever. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it's, for all of us, it's kind of like some days we're on it and other days we're like, I am so far away from that. One of the things that you said was brag. I think years ago I learned from Mama Gina, who is based in New York City, and she wrote a book called The School of Womanly Arts. And I had picked up her book at Super Crowns years ago and just loved it. I think she has a chapter in there about bragging, and I know in her work she talks a lot about bragging. And for some, I think for some men, it's easier for them to brag than for women.
Oh yeah.
However, she would do this whole thing where, you just brag and you go ahead. And so I always take what I like and leave the rest. And I grabbed onto that. So I've over the years have told my friends, go ahead and brag. Like, please do. Cause they'll have
Yeah.
like some success and I'll be like, wait a minute. They're like, I don't want to brag. I'm like, wait a minute, pause. I'm like, I want you to brag. It's okay. You can brag to me. And so and there are a couple of women in my life who I just know they get the bragging thing, and I'm like, I'm gonna brag. Like
Yeah.
I even get uncomfortable with it sometimes too, but or I'll be like, I just need to brag that, and then, tell whatever it is that I'm super proud of myself about or what have you.
Yeah, I think that's the other thing is that it's context, right? So it's like for me, for my closest friends, I want them to be able to brag. Like with you and some of my sister Kelly, who's been on the show many times, and other of my closest friends, like I want you to be able to brag to me, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, but that's different. Where if I go to a party and I know a couple people, but I don't know most of the people, you know, for me to be like, yeah, I'm doing really well, my life's going really great, you know, like that's a little different because I think that can come off as arrogance or
yeah,
egotisticalism or whatever, like not really knowing who, you know, not respecting the context of where I am, what sort of situation is. Um, Precisely because of that. I mean, like if you're talking to a total stranger, and you have a zero, like you don't know anything about them, they don't know anything about you. You could brag about something that is actually like a horrible negative childhood memory for them or something like that. You're just like, well, I'm on this, you know, I don't know. I can't think of a hypothetical example, but something that would just like, you know, for you, it's totally great. But just because you don't know this person, you don't know the context, you know, for them, they wouldn't really feel it that way. I don't know. I've definitely had that situation in social situations like parties in the past where like I start talking about something that normally everybody has a really great response to. And one person is like, you know, says something like, oh, my mother died, you know, when I was 12 from that or something. And it's like, my whole story just is like, all
yeah.
right, that's the end of that
Oops.
story.
Yeah. So
I'm
sorry.
so sorry about your mother. Yeah, so I mean, there's such a thing as context, but I think it's really important for us to allow the folks that are closest to us to really brag, because
Yeah.
then you don't have to worry so much about that line of like, oh, am I over the line or whatever, and you can just let
Yeah.
yourself, you know, be in the joy and the celebration and the
Absolutely.
healthy pride, you know, like I
Yeah.
accomplished something or something good happened to me or whatever, you know.
Will you
But,
celebrate with me? Yeah,
yeah.
that's awesome.
But I think, you know, the other weird part of this, because you brought up the whole men versus women thing, and, you know, those are always generalizations. You know, we're
Right.
always
Yeah.
individuals, and there's always
Yes.
nuance,
Yes.
but there are such things as trends and general, you know,
Yes.
large scale things that happen. And one thing that's really gotten into our conversation about mental health, in at least in the United States in the last few years, is this pattern that people are, you know, therapists and psychologists and people who have gotten sucked into it have started to really identify and talk about, is this romantic relationship pattern that tends to happen between a man, and I'm talking heterosexual here, but you know, you can make the flip everything for same gender things, but the man who has a narcissistic personality disorder, who's way far on the narcissism spectrum, and then a woman romantic partner with him who is an empath, you know, who is very empathic, very attuned towards helping others, listening, you know, that sort of thing, and how that can be like a super like nuclear level destructive relationship, especially
Mm.
for the woman. But one of the things I've now met, you know, I've had some experience with narcissists in my life, but I've now talked to a few women that have told me stories of like in their past, they had this narcissism empath, you know, they were the empath and they got involved with a male narcissist. And like one of the things they talk about in the beginning is like how they were attracted by the fact that the man bragged about himself so much in the
Mm.
beginning, and also did this thing called love bombing them, like complimented them on all sorts of stuff, you know, and like was just constantly like, wow, you're really great at this, and wow, you're really beautiful, that outfit is amazing. And then also mixed it in with their thing of like, yeah, I'm really amazing at my job, and like everybody in my company thinks I'm great. And the misstep there is that you don't really see happening at the time, because you're kind of sucked into this like, oh, everything's
Yeah.
magical.
Like
But
hooked
the
you in, like
yeah,
hook, line, and
but the
sinker.
misstep there is, in terms, and I'm not blaming, the victims here, but like, for the person who falls for the narcissist, the misstep is they don't necessarily feel good enough about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So when the narcissist builds them up with all these hyper compliments, the love bombing in the beginning, it just feels so good
Yeah.
because that person hasn't felt able to brag about themselves, to other
Or
people. So
give
it's
them
this.
the love bomb, as you say,
Right.
themselves.
They haven't been
Yeah.
able to love bomb themselves. Exactly. So
Wow.
somebody
Ooh,
else.
love bomb. I like
Yeah.
that. But to turn it around and just like love bomb ourselves.
Yeah.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
great.
But the other misstep is is mistaking the narcissism for confidence. And I think that's the thing is it's so rare in our culture that someone, when you first meet them, will tell you all the great stuff about themselves, that when somebody
That
doesn't
should be a red flag to begin with, right? Like,
well, but there's a fine line, right? Because nobody wants to date. Well, I shouldn't say nobody, but like typically you don't want to date somebody who, if you go on a first date, they're running themselves down negatively the whole time, right? That's a
no,
big
I'm
red
not
flag,
saying that either, but
right?
no, I'm not even going there. Yeah, like
Right,
that's a red flag too.
right.
Um, I just mean like I think that there should be this give and take,
Yeah,
and that there's healthy confidence in where I just naturally share something, or they
yeah,
would naturally share something like, yeah, I love my work and I'm really good at it. I've been doing it for X amount of years and I'm very
yeah,
successful. But there, instead
yeah,
of like ongoing, and
yeah,
then it's like, oh, just kind of noticing like this person talks about themselves a lot. They're not asking me many questions. You
yeah.
know.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's such a thing as like this sort of golden balance, which is tough. It's, like anything in life where you're trying to balance it, it's tough and it's probably more of an ongoing process, but it's
Yeah.
trying to balance healthy confidence with healthy humility and not go so far in the confidence realm that you're a total narcissist, egotistical narcissist who's just like, I'm great, I'm great, I'm the greatest, I'm the greatest. But you're also not, you don't go so far past humility that you're running yourself down all the time, that there's this like, you appreciate and are able to talk about what you like about yourself, what you like about your life, what you feel like is going well, but you also have the humility to understand that you are equal in value to every other human on this planet. You have flaws like everybody else, like that sort of thing. But I mean, I think we talk about that like, yeah, just be like that. And it's challenging because we get a lot of messages, like I don't know about you, but I watch a lot of, productivity gurus. I don't know. I've just always been fascinated with people who are sort of talking on YouTube or various internet platforms about like how people can improve their life, and a lot of them, they're very aggressive. I mean, they're just very, very aggressive about like, you need to get up every morning and you need to shout, like I've got to win or whatever, and it's
Mm.
like it's so you got that going on, and then we get conditioned by our sort of, usually by our families and perhaps our church or our school or whatever, again, not to shine too brightly, like don't make other people feel uncomfortable by, and that's a mixed message, like,
Yeah, I think
go be number one, but like don't make anybody uncomfortable. It's like, it's challenging, I think.
yeah, I guess it just depends on where you're at.
Yeah,
Like if you're a narcissist, like all of this stuff would just go over your head. You just like you wouldn't even be having this conversation.
yeah, we're not going to convert any narcissist on this
Yeah,
show
yeah, but at the
to being
same time,
non-narcissists.
I think it's finding out like what we need. Some
Yeah,
of us need to like boost ourselves up, and
yeah,
have friends who are supportive and you know compliment us or what have you. But then at the same time, I think it all begins with us, right? Like I need to
right,
do that for myself as well. And so listening to you know podcasts like this and
yep,
YouTubes where people are supporting you and being your best self and like loving yourself and being kind and seeing your characteristics that are wonderful.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. No, I mean, to bring it back to the beginning of what we were talking about, I think that's the aspect that comes into play if we're talking about the law of attraction, which is, as you always point out to me, is always operating.
yeah.
24/7, 365. It's always operating. It's always
Yeah.
picking up on our vibration.
Yeah, and
Uh,
we're not turning it on or off. We don't
right.
we don't have that capability.
Right. And so our goal is to practice the art of allowing, which is acknowledging that the law of attraction is operating all the time and getting our vibration, our feeling, our thinking as positive as possible to, and as sort of relaxed and gentle as possible to allow good stuff to flow in, and allowing ourselves to feel good mainly. Like that's the most
Yeah.
important thing. And so if we don't talk well about ourselves, and this goes for our mental self-talk, but also I do this because I'm afraid people won't know where their brain is. For those of you on the audio version, I just pointed to my head with my both fingers to make sure everybody understood that I meant mental um,
Appreciate
self-talk.
it.
But both with our mental self-talk and when we're talking to others,
Yeah,
if
about
we get into, I
ourselves.
mean, I've had this thing in the corporate world, and I think a lot of people who work in the corporate world in America at least can relate to this. I mean, there's a lot of potential things that are frustrating when you're working for an organization that is, several hundred or several thousand people, and you're all trying to do your individual jobs, but sort of do a gigantic, big job together. It's very challenging, just no matter what company you're working for. It's challenging to keep communication effective. It's challenging to manage all the personalities and keep everybody kind
Well,
of
it's like one
happy.
big family, right? And we usually
Well,
attract our family dynamics, right?
yeah,
So there's
yeah,
that end of it that everyone is being
yeah,
affected by, like, because they're bringing their family issues into the realm.
true, yeah. But you have a lot of these. You're in a lot of meetings that are like these public sort of things where everyone, you can't really, most of the time you can't share exactly what you think or feel about things. It's not and it's not because
Yeah,
there's some rule to like you shouldn't talk. It's just like not appropriate. It's like
right.
if you're having a meeting about like we're having a challenge with this project, let's brainstorm ideas on how to overcome it.
Hmm.
Like you might have the thought of like, well, the problem on this project is a problem with the whole company, and unless we address that, we're never going to fix this problem. So this whole meeting is ridiculous. It's not going to do anything. Like you might think that, but
Yeah,
honestly, that's not going to be helpful.
right,
So
right.
you're not going to say that. But then what that creates, and this is just my experience, but I think a lot of people can relate, is what it creates is this sort of like pent up. You've had these thoughts and meetings that you've kept to yourself, but in reality, other people have had them too.
Hmm.
And so then you're in the break room, or you're on a one-on-one phone call with a coworker, and
Hmm.
something like that, and then it's like one of you lets slip out something that you
Yeah,
thought but couldn't say in a meeting,
yeah.
and the other person thought that too, and you're like, oh my god, I know, wasn't that ridiculous how that thing went? And it's really easy to get into this like negative, 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 negative,
Yeah,
negative, and
yeah.
you just, because it's like this, there's this pent up thing of like you've kind of made mental notes of your criticisms or your issues or whatever, and you haven't had the right, either you haven't worked that out with
Yeah,
the
processed it
people in your
somehow.
life, like
Yeah,
sometimes you
yeah.
need to talk to friends outside of work and just go, oh, I'm frustrated with this problem. And you get to a place where you're like, oh, that's really about me. I should just really be more understanding of my coworkers, whatever. But yeah, I've had that issue, and I've talked to other friends in the corporate world about this. It's like it's a real trap, and it can be really it can feel great in the moment, or it can feel satisfying, I would say.
Well,
Not
it's
good,
like
but
it's almost like having a tea kettle, and then
yeah,
finally, it's like, "Arr," and then you let off the steam, right?
yeah.
So we need that. I remember you just reminded me of I knew a very successful woman who had a business locally, and she had it for decades, and it was well known. And I won't mention it just for privacy's sake, but she would share that she kept a tablet in her desk for
Hmm.
when issues came up, and she would pull it out and she would just journal and let it all
Yeah,
out. And that was her way of, instead of, because she's the leader, the owner of the business, of how to deal with things. And that was her way. And I always thought, I think I've said this before, journaling. I was one who practiced journaling for years, and it was like the easiest form of therapy, the most inexpensive form of therapy.
Yeah.
It's just like I'd start, and by the end, a page or two in, I'd be like, "Thank you, God," la la la, and I would just go from this like high energy, upset or whatever, let it all out on paper, kind of like we're talking about the teapot, just the kettle, just
Yeah.
letting
Boiling
it all
over.
out, and then once it, because that's in there, it's in us. We need to express it in a healthy
Yeah.
way, and then by the end, I was like, "Yeah, all is well. It's gonna be fine."
Yeah.
Whatever. It was like God came in and just kind of like transformed the energy.
Yeah. I it's interesting because like in thinking about my experience in the corporate world, there's this idea that gets passed around, and I think there's like a good core idea behind it. It can sometimes get misused in my experience, but there's a good core idea, and it's basically this principle. It gets stated in different ways, but the core of it is, if you're a worker and you report to a manager or a supervisor or something, don't just bring a problem to your manager or supervisor. Bring the problem, but bring some ideas about how to resolve it.
Mm,
Um,
I like
and
that.
yeah, I mean, it's there's one way you can misuse it as a manager or supervisor, which is you can use that to ignore all problems. Like people can bring real issues, and you're like, well, if you don't have a solution, then we're not going to really just, then
Well,
right.
like with
But
everything, right?
but I think the principle behind it is sound and good in the sense that like because what I've noticed is if I'm going to be honest about myself, like in that example, I've sat in many corporate meetings. It's just so much easier to poke holes at things. It's just so much easier to criticize. It just doesn't take much energy at all because especially if somebody's coming up with if a group or a person is trying to come up with a new idea to solve a problem, that is like you can always think up reasons it might not work. You know what I mean? Like if we're doing anything new, you can always sort of say, well, I mean, it's too risky, or, like, well, so-and-so tried that and it didn't work, or something like that.
Doubting, right? Like
And that's
even the
something,
Wright brothers, they're like, they're never, there's so many people. Like it's easy. Yeah, like you said, it's easy. It's easy to
yeah.
be negative. It's easy to like see that that's not going to work.
I think that's the thing about co-creation is when you're in the process of co-creation, you're in the process of allowing something to come into the universe and manifest that has never manifested before. There might have been things like it, like I'm a songwriter. So, I mean, there's been bajillion songs in the world, all sorts of different genres, have come into
You've
the world.
actually written a bajillion songs.
Well, thank you. Bless you. But like when I write a new song, that song has never, like nobody has ever put those notes, those chords, those words,
Right.
that speed, that structure with those instruments. Like no one has ever done that specific one.
So that has never happened before.
Right. That's the nature of co-creation is like you're doing something that hasn't ever occurred before. And the thing is, we have this massive database of all the things that have existed already. So if somebody's really knowledgeable about music and song, somebody can, if I play a new idea on my guitar or something, somebody can go, they can reference all the songs that have ever been written and just pick out reasons why my new thing shouldn't, is not good or whatever. And same thing in my corporate metaphor there. It's like if I come up with a new idea, there's all these old ideas that have already been done, and it's very easy to go to that pile of information and say, well, here's an example of somebody trying something like that and it not working. Here's an example of something doing something that's not what you're doing, and that was successful. So what you're thinking, I don't think will work. It's just very easy. And the co-creation process of actually allowing the new idea to just sort of grow, and not that you have to, like in that corporate metaphor that I keep sticking with, it's not that one person's idea has to be implemented exactly the initial way that first person thought about it, and there can't be any changes or evolution to it. But it is more challenging to say, well, how could we make it work? That's an interesting like sort of starting point. I'm not feeling great about it, but like let's all sit around and think about how could we get from there to something good rather than just like throw rocks at it and say,
And
yeah, this
isn't
is what.
that why the successful people are successful? Because they have teams
Yes.
like